Alright, for this video, this is really going to kind of be the bread and butter of this chapter, which is getting into skeletal muscle, as well as the next section where we talk about contraction and relaxation. So what we're hoping to achieve here is we're really going to look at skeletal muscle. We're not really going to spend any time getting into cardiac or smooth muscle right now. We'll review those, or we'll come back to those guys later when they are more important. So when we get to the digestive system or when we get to the cardiovascular system, we'll revisit those. But for right now, with this section, we're just going to focus on skeletal muscle. So we're going to talk about skeletal muscle. We're going to talk about the connective tissues that go along with it. We're going to talk about how muscles work along with tendons, look at some of the areas of skeletal muscle fibers, and then talk about the excitation-contraction coupling that occurs. So we look at the functions of skeletal muscle. The big one that we're probably aware of is voluntary movements, your ability to make movements using conscious thought. But we also use muscles to help maintain the skeletal stability. We also are going to help regulate the materials that come in and out of the body. We protect internal organs. And then thermoregulation, so think like shivering, right? If you shiver, you're generating heat to keep you warm. So skeletal muscle plays a whole lot. And there's some other ones that are not even necessarily listed here, like the fact that the skeletal muscle can actually help with returning blood up through the veins to the heart, right? So moving up from like the feet and the legs, which when we get into the respiratory system, we can talk about the skeletal muscle pump for that. So let's go ahead and talk about muscle arrangement for skeletal muscle. We have the epimysium. This is going to surround the entire muscle. It's going to separate muscles from the other tissues and organs. So it's kind of like a nice little covering all the way around that entire muscle so that we are like separated from everything else. And this is something that we can use to kind of help distinguish muscles from other things. We have the perimysium. This is going to surround the individual bundles of muscle fibers that we call fascicles. And then the endomysium, which is going to surround the individual muscle fibers. So the endomysium is going to be the most internal one. The perimysium is going to be in the middle. And then the epimysium is the outermost layer of connective tissue. But this way we can kind of bundle things together, and so we can keep things nice, neat, and separate from other organs. So if we look at how this is, here's our skeletal muscle. We have the epimysium surrounding the entire thing, right? We see those as multiple fascicles in that muscle. When we dive into just one of these fascicles, right, we see the perimysium around the entire fascicle. And within this fascicle, we see multiple fibers. And then when we dig into just one fiber, right, we see the endomysium around that, right, going all the way around that. And the sarcolemma. So this is just how we're seeing those connective tissue, how it kind of bundles and organizes the muscle together so they're all kind of going the same direction. Everything's nice and neat. But the muscles can't do things on their own. That's the important thing to note with muscles, is that while they do contract, they need something to tell them to contract, and that something is from the nervous system. And so the muscles need to have some sort of connection to the central nervous system or to the nervous system. And this is where the neuromuscular junction comes in. This is going to be the site where the nervous system and the muscular system meet. In particular, where the axon terminal of a motor neuron, which is a neuron that communicates messages for output, right? This motor neuron's axon terminal is going to actually come into connection with the muscle fiber. And so the muscle fiber, right, when it first responds to, it's going to first respond to signals sent by the motor neuron. So the motor neuron can excite that muscle fiber so that the muscle fiber can contract. Every single muscle fiber for the skeletal muscle fibers we have in every skeletal muscle is innervated by one of these motor neurons at what we call the NMJ, or the neuromuscular junction. Right? If for some reason our muscle did not have a neuromuscular junction, or it could not communicate with the motor neuron, then we would not have any contraction and therefore no movement. So here we see that neuromuscular junction, right? We see this nerve, we see the axon, like all these little tendrils coming out, the muscle fiber in that lighter purple back behind, and then we see these like circles, right? Those are the neuromuscular junctions. This is where that neuron is going to be communicating with the muscle cells. And so you may hear me say muscle cells, but sometimes you'll also see them referred to as muscle fibers because they're so long and cylindrical, like a long thread. And so you can use those terms interchangeably. That is a-okay with me. I'll even use them interchangeably sometimes, but just note that we're talking about the same thing when we're saying muscle cell versus muscle fiber. Exact same thing. And so we're going to talk about some of the structures we see in these muscle cells. Some of the names look maybe a little familiar or just like a little different than things we've heard of before, and others may not be familiar at all. But let's talk about these structures, including the sarcolemma, the sarcoplasm, myofibrils, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and T-tubules.